For those of you who didn't know, I did a 100 hours of mid lane challenge and in that time learned 6 champions, each focusing on a specific skill. And I'm gonna be honest, one of my least played class of champions is the traditional mage, so I thought a good place to start would be Viktor because he has a lot of tools in his kit. So for the next 10 hours, I'm gonna try to learn Viktor in 3 steps. First, normal games, second, do some research, and third, play some ranked games. I'm doing this because I'm trying to learn every champion so one day, I can make the greatest Viego video ever. So what runes and builds should you go on Viktor? Well, the most common rune is Summon Aerie. However, against assassin matchups or melee matchups, Grasp of the Undying is very good for healing, HP, and some still decent damage. For your build, you usually go with the burn build. Blackfire Torch and Leandre's for the burn, Rabadon's Death Cap and Void Staff to maximize damage, and something like Zhonya's or Banshee's Veil for survivability. However, you can also build Rod of Ages first item instead of Blackfire Torch if you need the survivability, especially if the enemy team comp has a lot of assassins or damage or something. And with that, on to some normal games. Sadly, my first normal game was met with way more challenges than I expected. From a lack of mobility that left me vulnerable to ganks.
You're so cringe.
To, you know what? No, it's pretty much just the lack of mobility actually, because I'd been playing a lot of champions like Akali, Fizz, and Galio, all of which who had dashes. Even though it was just my first game, I was already starting to panic. I swear, a roam like this would have worked if I was playing one of my other champions, but Viktor was completely different. And since this was my first traditional mage champion in over 4 months, I was completely overwhelmed on how to deal with these ganks.
Gotta play to Shaco's here, I'm dead.
My disappointment only grew because before these ganks, I was laning pretty well. I was winning most of my trades and LeBlanc was super low on HP. But while I sat there confused and frustrated, trying to figure out how to just kill LeBlanc, I'd stop paying attention to the minimap and get ganked. It didn't help that I was getting flamed by my team either. Even though everyone was doing bad this game, I was just the one getting blamed. Except you, Evelyn, you deserved better. Unfortunately, my inexperience with mages just kept rearing its ugly head, and I couldn't figure out what to do with no mobility. And it didn't help that Viktor was D tier as of the making of this video. By the end of the first hour, I had a clear idea of the things I most needed to work on. 1, obviously there was positioning. I could get away with bad positioning on champions like Fizz because I could just flip to safety, but Viktor was totally different.
I walked up too close, that's my fault entirely.
2, I need to work on my laning phase. Honestly, I think I was just surprised at how strong Viktor's early laning phase is, and I would get overconfident and make some bad plays. And 3, play my 1v1s a lot better. You see, my burst damage would be solid, and I'd be like, hey, maybe I can get a kill. Then I'd realize I have no abilities left and get absolutely mauled by the enemy Volibear or Mordekaiser or something. Wow! I would need to work on all 3 of these things if I had any hope of being ready for ranked in the next few hours. But you know what? Because Viktor is surprisingly strong early game, I was actually able to get a few sick outplays in just my second hour. So even when I got ganked for the 468th time in this video, I had all the tools to actually win the fight sometimes. Even if I wasn't playing quite, perfectly yet. No, I'm an idiot, I could have walked to the side! But I definitely was making improvements, especially with my movements, using my Q's bonus movement speed and Viktor's slows to completely outplay this poor Aatrox. I realized that with good movement and positioning, I was surprisingly hard to kill and had some solid damage. Even if I was only in that situation because of my bad positioning a few seconds earlier. With every passing moment, I was getting better at surviving, positioning, and using my abilities to the point where fights were going really well for me. Not having a ton of mobility was definitely frustrating, but I was beginning to see how Viktor made up for that in a bunch of different ways. With every game, my confidence was growing as I learned about Viktor's damage. My laning phase in 1v1s were just getting cleaner. And for the first time this whole challenge, I was actually winning lane. From start to finish, I was using my range and my Q shield to just dismantle the Syndra early game. I even tried my hand at roaming this game because I was actually ahead in lane for once, which kind of felt amazing with Viktor's long range and shockingly high survivability. But the moment I overstepped and got overconfident, I was quickly reminded of all of Viktor's weaknesses.
Yeah, I'm just dead.
Fair. Then, a team fight would break out and I'd be reminded of Viktor's strengths again. His incredible area of effect damage and the fact that I was getting better at spacing was really helping me see some genuine improvement in my gameplay, even using a special mechanic I didn't know about to get a kill. Absolutely get out of my face. You see, Viktor's ult stops channeling abilities, so I was able to stop Vel'Koz's ult early, which bought me just enough time to use my abilities and secure this kill.
You
I definitely hadn't mastered Viktor yet, but I could feel the power of the arcane coursing through my veins. Going into my next hour, things just snapped into place, and I finally felt like the hours of work were starting to pay off. Not only was I winning lane now, but I was also using my priority mid lane to help my other lanes as well. I was continuing to improve my 1v1s. Fights that would have scared me in the past now felt natural because I wasn't panicking anymore. And my positioning had improved to the point where I wasn't even taking damage anymore in fights. Even if this was just a 2v2 right here. I knew if I could keep playing like this, I would be ready for ranked in no time. I just needed to make sure this game wasn't luck, but actually a testament to my newfound skill. And after this play, I was officially ready for ranked. This silly Vi tried to invade our jungle at level 2, but I had a way better understanding of Viktor's kit now. I was able to push the wave early and kill her in our jungle, all while she probably spam pinged her Yone for letting this happen. And from that moment on, I had the enemy Vi downloaded, basically just making it impossible for her to play in her own jungle, all while managing to win my lane as well. With every team fight, my confidence grew, and Viktor was starting to make sense in a way that I never thought possible. You see, mages have always been a class I've struggled with, like I said during the beginning of this video, and I was truly amazed at how far I'd come so far. After these games, I realized Viktor is glorious. So I did some research on YouTube, and here's what I found. 1. When you hit level 3, put 2 points into Viktor's E. It's just better than his W because it makes your poke way stronger and more mana efficient. 2. Viktor is surprisingly strong early game. You shouldn't look for full fights, but your E is long range, amazing poke, and your Q is great for short trades. Basically just limit test and don't sit back waiting to scale. 3. Go into the practice tool and practice using your E's. I used the setting clamp cast target location within max range, and it helped me throw out max ranged E's without sending it in the wrong direction. You don't have to use this setting, just play around with this E and see what feels good to you. 4. I would say your biggest power spike early game is when you buy a mana item, like Lost Chapter or Catalyst of Eons, because then you can constantly poke with your E and Q. So even though you are strong early game, you want to try to time your first or second back to buy one of these items because then your power basically doubles. 5. Positioning is so important on Viktor. In fights, you don't want to be in the front, you don't want to dive the back line, and you don't want to constantly look for picks, unless someone is super out of position or something. Normally what Viktor wants to do is play front to back, use his abilities to make it impossible for the enemy front line to play the game, and play slow around his cooldowns, retreating if he has nothing up. And 6, you're a control mage. This means you want to control space with your abilities. If you don't want the enemy to walk a certain way, you can use your W and E to block them off, or else they take a bunch of damage. This means the threat of your abilities are more important than actually doing damage with them. For example, even if you don't do damage, if you single-handedly stop the enemy team from walking to dragon and you can just get dragon for free, that's kind of insane. And with that, on to some ranked games. Saying my ranked journey started as a bit of a disaster would be an understatement.
It's fine, it's fine, it's fine.
From messing up level timings like in that first clip, I really thought I was gonna hit level 6 here by the way, to just getting absolutely bodied by a freaking Veigar, someone who isn't even strong early game. I think the skill level of my opponents just went up way more than I expected when I headed into ranked. I was definitely more confident with Viktor and better with my fundamentals, like here, killing Veigar and also escaping the Wukong, but I was getting camped harder than ever. My opponents were better at trading, and my confidence was starting to waver. I'd put in all this work, and all of a sudden, the only kills I could get were when the enemy overextended. And even then, I'd get so infuriated when I didn't get the kill, I'd chase too far and die again. And things did not stop there. All of a sudden, I was nervous in my games again, trying to force plays that weren't there and way overplaying for kills like I did at the start of the channel. I was getting flashbacks to my very first game where I would be winning lane and winning trades, but just not know how to finish off the kill. Then I'd feel pressured to get the kill, and then I'd do something I probably shouldn't. In the blink of an eye, I was playing literally worse than my first game ever, and I didn't know what to do to get back on track. The only thing that made me feel better this game was that the score was 6-34, and I was not the only one doing bad on the team. but man, this was a rough stretch. All that being said, I did have one good game that could not have come at a better time. It made me realize that all my hard work hadn't been for nothing. I just need a little bit of time to get used to the ranked environment because I still had some good moments, which made me realize my biggest issue with Viktor: underestimating the enemy's damage. There were so many times in these games where I would think, there's no way they kill me here, just to immediately die because I walked up too far without any teammates around. Like in my worst game of the whole challenge, where I'd walk up for minions feeling completely safe, just to remember I'm a fragile mage who dies in a matter of seconds. I realized every movement and every decision on Viktor needed a purpose. Some champions like Fizz have a get out of jail free card, but Viktor doesn't. I need to respect the enemy's damage and always respect the fact I could die at any time. If I could do that, maybe I'd have a chance of mastering Viktor. Over the next several hours, I had a vision. What if I started building Rod of Age's first item instead of Blackfire Torch? You see, after my initial struggles, I watched a lot of Viktor streams and looked up some new builds, and realized a lot of the high-level Viktor players were building Rod of Ages, not Blackfire Torch. Sure, you do less damage, but you have way more survivability. I mean, just look at how much tankier I am with 2 ruby crystals against this Zed and Yasuo. And let's be honest, you don't do any damage if you're dead. But something about this build immediately worked for me because, again, I was doing less damage, there was no doubt about that, but I was playing more confidently with 450 extra HP, an extra level, and an extra healing effect. And hey, if Faker is building Rod of Ages on Viktor, who am I to question it, am I right? This new build gave me a level of confidence I hadn't experienced yet on Viktor, and the extra survivability helped me play way more consistent. The only issue with this build was the learning curve. Not quite understanding my tankiness or damage yet, so I decided to give Blackfire Torch one last try. But after trying Blackfire Torch one more time, I knew it wasn't for me. Although I did do more damage and I was a little bit more familiar with this build, it just didn't click for me the way the Rod of Ages build did. For every cool moment I'd have getting a kill like this one, I'd also have a death where a little bit more HP could have made all the difference. Again, Rod of Ages gave me way more confidence when I played Viktor, and I knew for a fact that was the build I was going to use for the rest of the challenge. So now that I had a new build, I was ready to take my Viktor gameplay to the next level. And just like that, everything just clicked. Okay, so technically the enemy team had an AFK and surrendered in 10 minutes, but anyway, going into these last few hours, I started to feel unstoppable, and the Rod of Ages build was getting better with every passing game. And I mean, what is not to love about this build? Watch me just slowly walk at the enemy Mel, getting hit by literally every ability, and just reaching the inevitable conclusion of her death. But it wasn't just the build that was finally starting to click, but also just everything about Viktor. I was positioning better, able to do damage while staying out of range of the enemy. The more I played, the more familiar I got with Viktor's damage too. What I once thought was no damage was actually a lot. I just hadn't been landing or using my abilities properly. Now, I was dominating fights that would have been helpless before. I would still occasionally get too excited in fights, but that's where the Rod of Ages and my new item Riftmaker came in handy. While the enemy team chased me down thinking I was just a helpless mage, I knew differently. I not only got a kill, but stalled just long enough for our Fed Trundle to join the fight and get an ace. This tankier damage over time playstyle was so powerful. My ults were massive, my damage was incredible, and my constant slows were infuriating for the enemy team. Like here, Hecarim was so angry he just ulted in and died at the end of the fight. Going into the final hour, I continued to improve, just not as fast as I had in the last couple of hours. There were no more massive revelations like a new build or a critical mistake like positioning. A lot of the last hour just came down to repetition, putting myself in more and more situations where I had to limit test my abilities and rely on everything I had learned. And if I did happen to mess up, I'd learn for next time. Like here, limit testing a 1v1 because I was more confident than ever before. I knew I had the mechanics and understanding to win the fight, I just needed to, take the fight. And the more I fought and limit tested, the more I fell in love with Viktor, especially his ult. There's something about his ult taking up the entire screen that is so exhilarating. And I know my final build was a little unconventional, but it worked for me, and that's all that matters at the end of the day. After 10 hours of experimenting, I found the Rod of Ages, Leandre's, and Riftmaker build to fit my playstyle perfectly, with Grasp of the Undying giving me enough sustain in lane to win most matchups. From absolutely feeding my ass off at the start of this challenge,
You're so cringe.
to eventually carrying games with my own special build, I had an absolute blast playing Viktor, even if he didn't fit my playstyle at the beginning. Oh yeah, I stream a lot on Twitch, so don't forget to check me out there, and feel free to like, comment, and subscribe. It helps the channel out a ton.